includes a multitude of the saints rejoicing. They're all right before the throne of God. Oh, I forgot to turn my phone. Okay, now we're going to start again. I'm sorry. I will get used to this, I promise. All right, this vision includes a multitude of the saints rejoicing before the throne of God, and they're praising God and worshiping, and to me it's a very joyful image of our saints. So I'm reading beginning at verse 2. I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the 4 angels who had been given power to damage earth and sea, saying, "Do not damage the earth or the sea or the trees until we have marked the servants of our God with a seal on their foreheads." And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000, sealed out of every tribe of the people of Israel. After this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes and people and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white, with palm branches in their hands, and they cried in a loud voice, saying, "Salvation belongs to our God, who is seated on the throne, and to the Lamb." And all the angels stood around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, singing, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen." Then one of the elders addressed me, saying, "Who are these robed in white, and where have they come from?" I said to him, "Sir, you are the one who knows." Then he said to me, "These are the ones who have come out of the great ordeal. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason, they are before the throne of God and worship him day and night within his temple. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. They will hunger no more and thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of the water of life. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." The second passage that I want to read relates more to the sermon, and I'm reading from the excerpts from the 34th chapter of Deuteronomy. And this is about Moses. Then Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo. And it goes on and it gives a big, long geographical description. And the Lord said to him, "This is the land of which I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not cross over there," he said to Moses. Then Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the Lord's command. He was buried in the valley of Moab, and to this day no one knows his burial place. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His sight was unimpaired, and his vigor had not abated. His vigor had not abated. The Israelites wept for Moses in the plains of Moab 30 days. Then the period of mourning for Moses was ended. Never since has there arisen a prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. He was unequaled for all the signs and wonders that the Lord sent him to perform in the land of Egypt, against Pharaoh and all his servants and his entire land, and for all the mighty deeds and all the terrifying displays of power that Moses performed in the sight of all Israel. And that is how the book of Deuteronomy ends. And we ask God's blessing upon our hearing and understanding of these holy words. In the 1960s, when all the boring old baby boomers like me were young, a much quoted mantra declared, "Never trust anyone over 30." Now that that very t-shirt, the one that carried those words, is several sizes too small, that phrase sounds ridiculous. How the times have changed. Even Jerry Rubin, the yippie turned yuppie, found a new mantra. His words, "I used to say don't trust anyone over 30. Now I say don't trust anyone under 50. Interesting. The fact is that even as the 60s saw the blossoming of the civil rights era, it also honed a new kind of prejudice, ageism. Although the 60s were not alone in shrugging off those who were 60-something, the picked-up pace and increasingly disposable lifestyle of the later days of the 20th century practically made growing older a sin. This was not just a cosmetic skirmish against gray hair or soft bodies and those ever-expanding wrinkles. It was a widespread, ongoing cultural hostility against aging in general and the aged in particular. We routinely assume that our oldest generations only want to be with those of their own age, that they're scared of or uninterested in new ideas or new ways of doing things, that sexuality and sensuality are no longer a part of their lives, that illness and infirmity are way too typical of their age. But the truth is, the fastest growing segment of our population is over 65. And I'm not going to make you raise your hands to prove my point. People are living longer and healthier lives. In 1 century, there was an astonishing 50% increase in longevity from 49 in 1900 to almost 80 in 2000. Centenarians are the fastest growing segment of the population, percentage-wise. My mother's 102. And by some accounts, the life expectancy of a child born today is expected to be over 90. Just think of it. I heard this story about a woman in a nursing home who was given a party to celebrate her 100th birthday. Her pastor came to offer his congratulations. And later he said, "You know, her mind was really keen and alert. When I arrived, she was completely caught up in the excitement of the birthday party." A reporter had come to interview her, and when he asked that high-spirited 100-year-old woman, "Do you have any children?" she replied without hesitation, "Not yet." There's food for thought. Even our language is changing to be able to describe this phenomenon. Some of the words I've seen surfacing to describe aging in a positive light, words like eldering, the longer living, seniors, and my very personal favorite, the chronologically advantaged. If any place in our culture should be excited about these numbers and what they mean, it should be the church. For too long, all the denominations have been moaning about the grain of the church, as if all Christians were stamped with some kind of expiration date, like milk and meat, and should be discarded after a certain age. The truth is that in this church and many others, each generation has something to offer to the other and learn from the other. And in a time when families are spread all over the country, like my children are in Kansas and California, as some of you know, we seldom see each other. So celebrating the coming together of the generations in church is not only important, but it's downright necessary. Church may be one of the few places where our young people can interact on a regular basis with people with wisdom and experience to share. A former parishioner of mine once said that he sees the church ideally as being one fabric with so many valuable threads sewn together. I love that image, but realize that the ongoing question is how to make the best use of the entire fabric. Today we're observing All Saints' Day. Technically it was last week, but there were a couple of things going on. So we're going to focus on All Saints today. A day that celebrates the church getting older and better. All Saints' Day celebrates the age and the wisdom of the church. We find strength and renewed vitality in the long history of the institution, as well in the lives of those who were and are involved in the church over long periods of time. Why is it that when a church is filled with lots of youth and young families, we celebrate it as alive? Well, when a church fills its pews with those in their third age, which is 60 and older, we shake our heads at the church's decline. The very young and the very old are the fastest growing groups in America. Why do we keep focusing so much of our money and our time and programming on trying to swell the ranks of the youngest, some of which we should do, of course. Of course that's necessary. But not at the cost of ignoring the needs and interests of the elders, the oldest. I think that a question very relevant to our church is, why do we target those with the least amount of time available for volunteer activities, those midlifers, for leadership positions? We try to get them doing all that work, while failing to engage those who now have a far greater flexibility of time, retirees, for crucial areas of church activity, growth, and development. During his youth, Moses lived as an Egyptian, pampered and privileged in Pharaoh's house. In midlife, Moses worked hard tending sheep and raising a family, being a member of a busy community. Not until he was appropriately aged did God call Moses into his most active service. In his third age, Moses did not retire into sedentary oblivion. He became the servant of God unlike any other we've known. He was Israel's greatest leader. It's time to celebrate the really positive dimensions of growing old gracefully. Grace-fully. What gifts and graces do today's and tomorrow's third agers have to offer our churches? While part of my purpose is to affirm those already in their later years, it's also meant to maybe affect a change in mindset for those rapidly approaching old age. And if you don't think it's not coming, it is. A couple of weeks ago, I reposted on Facebook a quote that said, "I thought growing old would take longer." Yeah. What happened, we all say? What happened? All of us must follow Moses by leading and learning to grow old gracefully. So what might that look like? Growing old gracefully does not mean winding down. Instead, it means learning to shift gears, sometimes into overdrive, sometimes into four-wheel drive. Growing old gracefully does not mean letting others take over the reins and just settling back. Instead, it means letting God direct your course. God has some really odd ideas sometimes, but they often turn out to be really, really good. I thought I retired 3 years ago. You see how that went. Growing old gracefully does not mean disengaging from your community. Instead, it means being prepared to take on new positions of leadership. As one chronologically advantaged person said,